for this summit. Maybe it would be helpful to like get some numbers to like quantitatively say like, oh, like only 50% of the people who want to come can, or maybe only 80, like whatever that is. I'm super empathetic of people obviously who can't make it. Obviously, I think we want to be as inclusive as possible, but if we had some numbers around that date, the dates, right?
I think people have been chiming in on the issue. Is that sufficient to get a head count there? Is it what? I mean, one approach is to go on the issue and say like, hey, make a comment that says July 26th or whatever, and get a tally of thumbs up, thumbs down. And that might be the most efficient way to do it, and throw like a handful of dates out there. Personally, I'm flexible. I think that the big questions in my mind are: is it enough time to be productive, and are we going to get enough people and the right people, right? Not to say that some people are more valuable than others, but I think
what I would say is that actually, if a majority can attend, or 80%, 90% can attend on short notice, I don't think that's inclusive enough. That's not we should give, if somebody wants to attend and participate, we should give them enough time to be able to make plans.
That's a fair point.
The other thing that's sort of rolling around in my head, and I don't know, Ali, you can comment on whether this makes any sense, is like we could still try and push a full summit out a bit to give more planning time, and then possibly have the subset of people who are going to be around just meet to talk about things in person, as opposed to making it an official summit. Is that any different, or is that still not excluding people just because they're not there?
I think like if anybody's free to meet whenever they want with the people they want to meet, right? So, but if it's the Node Diagnostic working group that wants to meet and get stuff done, then I think we should do some more effort to make sure people have time to make plans and attend.
I mean, would it be helpful to like, perhaps we can just identify, I think, specific issues that we want to work through that perhaps can be more inclusive? Like, I know there are specific things that maybe, Matthias and us have been working on, or other things where, it could be like a subset of the group anyway who would be interested in that discussion. So I'm with Michael, kind of like there's this opportunity where a bunch of folks are going to be around. And so,
I guess Ali's point is that somebody who may want to be involved in that conversation doesn't have the opportunity to participate because short planning, right? So I think, the reality is that if, there's two people in a room who are interested in a topic, they're going to have a conversation on that topic, right? And I think that that's going to happen at, what is it?
Node Summit.
Node Summit in July, right?
Would it be helpful to have like hangouts? Because we have conference rooms here that are basically just hang out, like they have Google Meet or whatever, and so it's very typical for folks to be remote and dialed in and be able to participate. So I would almost treat it as like another one of these diagnostic meetings where a bunch of folks are remote, but there's a bunch of folks in the room, and so it kind of, because people are already here, it's just a convenient meeting spot. Would that be kind of more amenable, I think, than like I don't know if folks who can't attend because they're physically just not able to attend, or they have conflicts, right? If they have conflicts, then obviously we should find a better time. But if it's because they're somewhere else or whatever and they can dial in, would that make it? I think I'm just trying to give an opportunity to provide a venue for folks who want to discuss certain things because they're already here, right? But again, I want to make sure that we're inclusive so that folks who want to attend can.
That's fine. So I'm in the Bay Area, and actually, I actually have conflicts. I will not be able to attend on the 27th.
So that's even if it was a 1 hour hangout.
Yeah, I will not be able to attend on the 27th.
So, I mean, I'm sympathetic both ways. I think if somebody has a strong opinion, like, I think you should voice it. I think the strongest argument I've heard so far is from Ali, right? Which is that we should give fair warning, and we should have people be able to plan to attend these things. And I do think that's sort of in alignment with, this overall, notion of inclusivity, right?
Right.
Go ahead.
The thing I'll add is, I don't think we're going to get as broad a group as we did the last time, given the shorter notice. So the other thing I think we want to avoid is having one which then says, oh, well, we've already had one, let's not have another one for 6 months, right?
Right. Exactly.
So because then we, then those people haven't had the chance to participate. I know there was discussion of having one in February, so.
I mean, that just seems like a really long time out. So maybe.
Oh yeah, I was thinking like maybe September, right?
Yeah, like if we can do like September, then that's maybe it's like, okay, so we could have some informal meetings at Node Summit. Then it sounds like we want to make sure everyone can attend. Then should we talk about kind of where we want to have, when we want to have the next summit?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, so I mean, I would throw out that either before or after the October conference in Vancouver. Just to align with travel and stuff for people. And I would throw out, like something, a few weeks ahead of that in September, and, say with those two proposals and putting those up on this issue and getting a thumbs up, thumbs down count might be the best approach, right? I think folks coming in from Europe or traveling far, coming in to in North America and then 2 or 3 weeks later coming back might be a pain, and that might be something to avoid. So if it's possible to align this stuff with JS Interactive, then I think that would be ideal.
So there's already going to be like a collaborator summit, right? So do we feel like there's enough time to do that and a 2-day diagnostics summit? I just think like folks are going to be giving talks, they're going to be attending the conference. There's already a collaborator summit, and like, are we at risk of like people burning out? Because I know personally, like after a summit and a conference, I basically need to check out for a week. It's like my brain's fried, right? So so what do we think about that?
Those are valid considerations. I don't know that.
So one possibility is, I know Yang, I don't know if he's on the call. Yeah, he is. So I think Yang had proposed like, hey, they're happy to host one in Munich next February or March. And I know that there's some appetite to host the next one in Europe. So could we do that in September instead? I know September in Germany is probably better weather than say February, March, but
So September might be possible, yeah.
Okay, so would that work for folks? Sometime in September we can go to. At least we can start an issue and talk about it, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's.
Yes, is like, I mean, if we can get like a series of proposed dates and locations on the issue, and people can somehow go in and vote for what's good or bad, right? And if somebody has like real concerns, like saying like, hey, this violates, whatever, then they should voice it there. I don't know that there is I don't know that we're going to get to a date that everybody's like, I am in full agreement that, everybody's in agreement that, September 14th in Berlin is the place to be, right? And
so one thing about September in Munich is that the second half of September is going to be the Oktoberfest, which might be a bad thing or a good thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, what's wrong with that?
Why would it be bad?
Well, it's going to make flights and hotels way more expensive.
Right. So we're happy to host whenever. I was just trying to be more conscientious. I know Michael Dawson had talked about like, hey, folks, there's some interesting, not always hosting it in North America, but obviously we're happy to host a venue whenever, really. Weather here is always good. So, maybe let's start an issue. We can propose some dates and locations, and then let's just figure out from there like what works for people.
Yeah.
Does everybody agree that's a fair approach forward? Does anybody disagreement that that's the right approach forward? Okay, silence is agreement. Excellent. Okay, is there anything else on this, or can we move on?
Should I close that issue then for Node Summit then, or maybe
morph it into like, let's pick the dates for the next one, and and let's like figure out a process of like, how we can tally votes for what people are in agreement with or not in agreement with.
Would you mind like just writing a summary then in that issue, kind of what we discussed, like, oh, we'll do that, and then we closure.
So I think nobody is going to mind if you just host something not under the label of Diagnostics Summit, but just sort of getting people together to talk about topics. I mean, I wouldn't be able to attend this time, but I wouldn't mind either.
Okay. I mean, I could do that if people are comfortable with that. Certainly, we can host an informal thing, right?
Sort of, hey, do you want to hang out and chat, kind of?
Yeah, we can like leave hangouts on. People can join. Kind of, we can just chat informally. But again, I'm happy to do that. I think I'm just looking for direction from the group to for whether that's something we want to do.
So slightly different but important topic. So Matteo can't join because the meeting is full. He's recommending we switch to Zoom. So Michael, do you know if that's possible?
Yes, it is. Do you want me to set that up?
Yes, please, because I think right now he can't join.
Yep. Let me just, it'll take me a minute to log into the right account, and then I'll paste a link in here.
Okay, so I guess in action items, we can host an informal thing, and then who's going to own kind of filing an issue and figuring out dates for the next one?
You want to do that?
I guess.
You want to take those actions?
Yeah, sure, I can do that. That's fine.
Okay, thanks.
I'm just writing like in the actual minutes. Next steps will be suggestion of dates, and then discuss. You're just asking to have something in the issue itself, so I just type that in, and then you can jump in with the next steps.
Okay, great. And I have to jet, so I'll talk to you guys later.
Okay. Talk to you later.
Thanks.
Okay, I'm just lining in, although that might let Matteo log in if we want to just keep going.
I'm pinging him.
What's the limit on this? How many people?
I think it's 10.
Yeah, we've got 8 now, so. Do you need a client for Zoom, or does it just work with your browser?
I think it usually asks you to install something, although it doesn't take long.
You need a client.
So if Matteo can get in, we should probably just keep going. But,
hey everyone, I made it.
There you go. You made it in.
Okay, let's keep going. What was next?
I have one question. Is the meeting canceled? So are we not doing a meeting at Node Summit so I can book flights? That's my...
There may be an informal thing at Node Summit. I think the opposition is there wasn't sufficient time for people to sort of plan and schedule stuff for an actual diagnostics summit. So there's going to be some proposal of some dates. Those will start in September's timeframe.
Perfect.
And there will be an up-down vote on various dates, locations for the summit.
Fantastic.
But may say something like, hey, if you want to hang out on this day, but we just won't do an official summit.
Yeah, that's fine. That's perfectly fine. I just want to know because from your post, Michael was not clear that it was if book flights or not, go ahead and book flights. Don't wait for this. That's only because of how air travel goes. So It's going to get expensive otherwise.
So number 185, this is the strategic initiatives. I don't remember. I thought the action here last time was for the README to get updated or something, and people to identify owners and what did we say they were? Champions and stakeholders.
I think it's done too.
Is that
like there? Yeah, there's basically, if you look at the main README, there are current initiatives listed there. So I think we could just close this.
Okay. Is there any reason this needs to stay open? We close it.
Seems reasonable to me.
Okay. Let me close it. Perfect. Okay, next, the diagnostics channel, number 180. I think Ethan was going to try and drive on some of this. I don't know if he's on the call. I don't think he is he?
No, he's not.
Okay, we'll come back to it then. Deep dives. I think it was scheduled a deep dive on some of the async context stuff that we've been working on, maybe coming up in a few weeks, maybe before the Node Summit. I think there's a suggestion to do one around tiers of support and how we're going to deal with that. I don't know when that's going to happen, or did it happen?
It did not. I should probably, since I volunteered to be the champion for that, I should probably figure out when. So I'll say that's my action to do.
Okay. Okay, so CPU profiling roadmap. I think Matthias had an update in the issue here. It looks like.
È qui, Anna. È qui. Cercavi la puff?
Sorry. I thought.
Sorry,
I was like, I don't understand that, but okay. So it looks like code event listener API is landed in V8. Node 10.4 is V8 6.7, which fixed the interpreted frames. There's an NPM package to use the API. And there's tests that were added in Node Core for Linux perf.
Right. Did the test land already?
I don't know if it landed. There's not a link here. I know I remember seeing some emails bouncing through about the PR, but
right.
I don't know if it actually got checked in. And I don't know if anybody has a specific issue handy.
Yeah, I remember it flying by, and I remember Matthias saying that he will land it if there is no opposition. And that was a couple of days ago, so.
Maybe it did get landed. It says in his update that they were added. So.
Yeah, in that case, they probably landed.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, any other updates there from anybody?
So I guess the only thing that's missing in the perf API is that it doesn't really work for inline functions. But that was to be expected, and we don't really have a plan how to fix that.
That's no worse than it was before, though, right?
No, definitely not.
So
I
think the first thing was to get it back to where we were. So
right, yeah.
I don't think it's so. To me, the way it shows, the fact that it doesn't distinguish inline function is actually a feature.
How so?
Because it tells me that thing has been inline, that some function calls has been inline in there.
All right, sure.
So it's if I want that, I turn on. I don't remember the flag, but there's a flag do not inline whatever, and then I have the full thing. So
yeah, sure. But then you get a different performance profile, right?
Of course, but if I need to find where my thing is at, whatever, it's where my application is at, that's very it works more or less. So I would not concern. I'm personally, as the fact that we get the interpreted ones back, that's fantastic. So I don't consider that a bug. That's what.
Okay. Yeah, that's nice to hear. Yeah, we don't really have any immediate plans to fix that either. Yeah, so all right.
Okay, anything else there? Okay, Asynchook stable API number 124. Any updates here?
So Matteo opened a pull request for the current resource. I think that's under discussion. But apart from that, I don't think there's been much work done since the Collaborator Summit.
Okay. And outcomes from the Collaborator Summit?
So at the Collaborator Summit, there was discussion of whether we are ready to make it stable. And I think there's an issue discussing some things that must happen before I think it should become stable. There's discussion of a formally defined semantics that I think you're working on, Mike and Mark. But there were also concerns raised that actually it's probably moot anyway because people are using Asyncooks anyway, so it doesn't matter.
There have been a couple of people, Vladimir and myself, more or less, that say the fact that we can't really break them.
Sorry.
If we break Asyncooks, it causes problem for a significant amount of enterprise customers.
Right. I think in existing LTS lines.
Yes, in existing LTS lines. So that's kind of the. So it's somewhere in between not being out of experimental and being stable, because if we go and change, it's a feature that people cannot upgrade to Node because that's not in place.
The way I'd characterize it was there's a general feeling, maybe not from everybody, that we need the semantics and terminology to be able to reason about it before we want to make it non-experimental.
Okay.
But at the same time, what's already there in existing releases is dependent on, so we don't necessarily want to change the APIs and backport that. So I could see, maybe the way forward is that once we have the semantics, once we're comfortable that we can actually say that, what we have or something different is the right thing, we're leaving it as experimental, so we have the flexibility to do that. But there would be opposition to backporting those changes to previous releases because, people actually are using it in production. So it's like Matteo was saying, we're kind of in a middle ground where we need to acknowledge to not break people, but at the same time, we need to keep the flexibility of actually changing the API if we discover what we have isn't the right thing based on the terminology and the stuff that you guys are working on to help us reason about it.
Okay. But doesn't that already mean that we are de facto not experimental anymore if people are relying on it in production?
I think the other thing was that So, for example, Thomas mentioned that, as APM vendors, they've kind of realized that using this in experimental means that they'll have to make adjustments. Similarly with monkey patching, right? Internal things. So there's an appreciation there that they will need to make updates. It's just that if we force those updates on non-major release boundaries, that won't be a good thing. And I know the thing would be that Semver, the major ones are Semver major, so we can already break things, but we do work not to break people too much, even though Semver major is allowed, right?
Yeah. I think at this point, what's very important are also test cases to reflect what people expect.
Yeah.
As a side note, I can say that about 2 weeks ago, the MongoDB module called Node.js started using the Embedder API for Asyncooks. That's another big module now that uses it.
Yeah, I know. I think not sure about why that was done, but that's you can probably imagine. So. We were involved. It's awesome.
The thing to note is that NAN, I added support in NAN to use the Embedder API. So, so native modules already are getting use of it as well.
Okay. Anything else here?
I want to bring back, I can't remember who asked the question before. So if we are in fact saying that we're not going to backport anything, breaking any breaking changes, are we then not out of experimental? The question was raised before, but I don't think it got answered. What is the next level above experimental? I can't remember.
Stable.
Yeah, I don't think we have an in between.
Which is
yeah. So actually, I will push back a little bit, right? So actually, so I have two hats, right? So on one side, I care about Asyncooks and getting the implemented right, but I also am an APM vendor. I actually would prefer that if there are changes that they're backported, because then I have one path that I support, as opposed to doing different things for Node 8 versus Node 10. So I don't know why it would be a bad thing to backport. People don't get broken the day a node. I mean, Asyncooks, it's APM vendors that are using it, not end users directly. And APM vendors have to adjust anyway if you're going to break it then on the latest release on the current branch. So they need to adapt anyway. They might as well do it for all releases as opposed to having special cases.
It's also used inside. It's also used to do continuation local storage at this point in a lot of enterprise use cases.
Yeah, but continuation local storage is to adjust anyway, right? So continuation local storage. So I don't think it's so for the. I think we have actually changed the API in the past, like the way promise hooks were done, like the prompt init callback, what the information they receive. That has changed, and we have backported that. So, but it's not clear to me that this is not something that's not doable. It's experimental. I think what we should do is when there are changes to potentially backport, I think we should evaluate at that point rather than making a blanket decision right now that this is never going to happen.
Yeah, if I made it sound too black and white, sorry.
It's to me, it's more about the LTS lines.
Well, even there, I think there can be an argument either way. I think
there is an argument either way. So I'm perfectly fine in additive changes or in very big bug fixes. But if you change the name method, the method of names for whatever reason, or if you change the embedder API for whatever reason, that's going to be very bad for the ecosystem. So that's my take, at least. It's not just NPM vendors. So it's also modules. It's a lot of other things.
So I think to summarize this, it's that it is still an experimental. There's there's not unlimited freedom to make changes, given the fact that this is being used relatively widely for a experimental feature, and there's pros and cons to any time somebody wants to backport changes, and if and those things should be considered on a case-by-case basis. Is that a fair summary?
I'd say yes. It's like we're agreeing
Yes.
we should be sensitive to making breaking changes.
Okay. Anything else here on Asynchooks and Stable API? And then I think there's, Matteo, you wanted a specific PR on the agenda, so that's at the end. We can discuss that now if you'd like, since we're on topic.
Yeah, it's in there. I talked about it for a while. I finally had time. I finished my traveling after the Node 10.4 came out. I had to actually wait the new V8 to actually verify this was actually working, because I needed in order to file the PR at least, because otherwise it would have been a little bit moot because of how different it was before and after the revert that we did for the throwaway promise in Async await. So I put the PR in, gives us some performance benefit and add a completely new API to Asynchooks, which is the current resource. No, let's note that this is, I don't think this is backportable as it is. If you want to backport it, I have the other code that can run in Node 8 or something.
But that's fine, right? Because the old API with IDs will still
yeah,
like they don't change, right?
No. This doesn't change. The key concept
is extension to the old API.
Yes, it has some benefits and some some interesting things and some discussion points. So the first thing that it stores the current async resource into the context, into the V8 context, which is a different way from how the other things has been done. Now, Anna is pointing out that there might be cases that this does not really work, but I don't know. So I would really want to understand what those are.
Have you addressed any API changes, or are there any API changes needed for this?
There is no internal API changes. There is an addition to, I think, to the embedder API, I think, but I'm not even sure. So there is some little changes somewhere, but not, I need to exactly point out, but I don't think that there is no C++ changes at all in the,
like no external API changes.
No external API changes at all on the C++ side, probably on the JavaScript side, but we changed it, the internal stuff, the internal before signature. So the way it works is when we create an async resource, the V8 object gets flagged as persistent anyway, and so that gets retained. So when before gets emitted, I can take that object that I have and stick into the context, and that's it. So and then when there is after, I just remove it. And I just wind it down. So that's how it works. Is simple, probably simplistic. Now the naming and so on, it can actually be whatever. Okay, so I'm not. It's not a good name. So I just wanted to get it out so somebody else can tell me what name to put it in. But it's that's more or less the crux of it. It has some benefits because it removes a lot of C++ to JavaScript back and forth, so it's actually pretty good, and so on. One thing I want to note to Mike that he made some comment. I will put those in writing. The reason why I'm doing that and not doing the walking back is that at the current state of things, it won't work for async await functions.
Sorry, what won't work for async await?
Your concept of linking the context, it won't work.
Why doesn't that work?
The reason is every time you do an await at this point by the spec, and this is something we discussed with Benefit, that we would like to change at TC39, and a long story. But every time you do an await, the model, the waits.
There's the spec basically says you need to create 2 promises every time you do an await.
Yeah, but they are not linked together. So basically, basically the context gets by forks, at least in the current AsyncContext implementation.
But I thought there's a spec change proposal from Maya to actually rectify that.
Yeah.
There's V8 changes to do promise resolve instead.
I know. I know all of that. So what I'm just saying is the reason why it's implemented in that way, it's because it matches 100% what you do with init and destroy.
Okay.
So it's the exact same logic, okay? Because you can't do anything else at this point in time. If you don't do something else, what you want really is that when you create a transaction or something like that, you want that context to be the exact same object throughout the place. That's but it's more related to the model and so on. If you
but I mean, I guess my comment was that if I was reading the code correctly, that what I believe in your benchmark, and I don't think this is relevant to the benchmark, but I pointed out nonetheless, is that you're just copying the object versus creating a new instance for that property bag, right? And you'll just overwrite stuff.
It's not, because it's at the beginning it won't have one.
Right. So it creates one, and then every subsequent thing it copies, right?
Yeah.
So at some point, if you have some timer calls in there or something that spawn off some additional, async forks, those all end up with one copy for a property bag. And somebody can go in and say, like, I want to set a value on here. It'll write it in the same property bag.
Yes, exactly. But that's how most of APMs works today, anyway.
Okay.
So that's how people, if you look at the init build destroy example, that's the exact same thing. And that's code that I more or less was very much inspired from Elastic APM, really. So.
Okay. I'm either not following it or there's some edge, there's some reason why that works that I don't understand.
Well, let's go back to GitHub on this, and we'll situate.
I mean, I think you can come up with a counterexample where you end up stomping on values there. I don't think it's that difficult, but we can discuss it. It's outside the scope of the PR, given that it's just some code in the benchmark. So.
Okay, perfect. No, well, it's part of the code. Like, if that benchmark is not correct, then we have a problem, kind of. So I want to model exactly.
Throw up a counterexample that I think works, and you can tell me why the counterexample is wrong.
Okay, perfect. That's fine. That would be fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, anything else on 21313? Okay. So moving on. So AsyncContext Formalization. There's a PR posted. There's been a number of comments there that some I still need to get back to. I think there's a few themes that have popped up, and my plan is to update the document at some point here with to sort of be explicit about what these themes are. So one theme is how do these definitions work in generators? I think that's fairly straightforward. I'll go into the doc at some point here and add an example that explains that. And in this case, it's like the context is defined by a frame on the stack. I think that works fairly nicely for generators. For async await, I believe it works nicely as well. I need to sort of work through it, but I'll have another example in there for async await. What I need to do is go through and make sure that the promises when constructed, have the right context that falls in line with all the other definitions. So that's on me there. I don't know if anybody else has read it. I know, Michael, you had some comments the other day, yesterday, maybe.
Yep.
Or I need to go through those and respond to those. If you've read it, I'd appreciate feedback. If you're like, I don't understand it, I'd like to know that, because I think the goal here is that we end up with a set of terminology and concepts that people are like, yeah, I understand what this means, right? People like Joe JavaScript can reason about asynchrony and use the same set of terminology that, you know, everybody else is using, right? It's not a mystery, right? So if somebody's reading it and you're looking at it and you're like, I don't get it, please reach out. I'm happy to get on a call with anybody, you know, privately, or you want to get on with a small group and talk through this stuff. I'm happy to do that. If you've got comments, you know, you can either reach out to me directly or, you know, put comments in the PR.
Yeah, I found personally, like the first few pages, actually, I could get through relatively easy. Then I kind of lost steam. So I need to go through it again, you know, having read it once, given it a bit of time to settle, go back and read it again. But I found like some of the initial concepts were actually pretty clear. But then after I don't know, once it got into the later part, I figured, oh, I'm going to have to come back, because I started to
zone out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so if there's specific things where you're like, this tripped me up, or this I glazed over here, it's like let me know if there's specific things about the terminology, you know, that like, hey, this term means something else in my head. This is something that's needs to be done better. Like, please let me know. I think what's one of the harder things about this is finding the right set of names that resonate with people. The other thing I think that came up in some conversations with Ali and Kelvin was this idea of like, well, how do we traverse this graph, and how do you make it easy for somebody to traverse the graph? And I think that needs some more thought and some more work. And I'll try and get to that. I kind of have some ideas about that, you know, that I think I need to just sort of talk through or float around at some point and see if that people are like, yeah, that makes sense, or that's like, no, you're smoking crack or something. But that's the other thing coming, which is like, you know, in my mind, how I'm thinking about this is you define the data structure, and then you can define traversal algorithms over top of it by labeling the edges, which seems like a fairly general purpose mechanism to walk this structure. So that's the thinking in my head. And after reading the friggin' TC39 ECMAScript spec last week, which, you know, I don't know, I never really like dug into it deeply before. What's the right word? I feel like what we're coming up with can sort of fit nicely in that model of the spec, at least in the spec language. And so I'm sort of, I feel, you know, humbled from reading the spec, and I also feel confident about, I think, the ability to get some of these concepts sort of smoothed out and then incorporated into spec language, which I think is the next step. So, anybody have any comments on that at all? Is this like something that people are just like, I don't care?
I need more time.
Yeah, I think it's definitely interesting. Again, we'll just need to take a few passes.
It takes a significant amount of time to review and understand it properly.
Okay, that's good.
Like it's not simple to digest.
Okay. If there's, Matteo, if you want to get on a call and like talk through it, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, that's yeah. I am going through a period of very business, travel, and vacation time, so it's going to be a little bit problematic. But I'll find out. Let's maybe schedule a call, but it will be July at this point because my availability is stupid.
whatever works for you. And if there's specific things where you're like, I lost you here, then please reach out. And it's true for anybody. It's like, please don't think that like you're reading it, and if you don't get it, that somebody else must get it, so you're just going to be quiet. Like, I really want to hear if people are getting lost in it, right? Like, it's not the intent that it's not the intent that it's supposed to be flying over people's heads, right? So I want to find a way to try and make this simple and approachable, and that's challenging. Okay, moving on. Trace event stuff, number 84. I don't know if there's any updates here. From anybody? No, I know James was making traction on some of this stuff, but did we find an owner for this? Like sorry, what did we say? Champion? Maybe not. So we don't have a champion. Okay, so we should probably.
What was the topic? I missed the earlier part. Which topic?
This was the trace events.
So yeah, so James volunteered to be the champion, and I've been doing some work on it as well. So I can give a small update. So on trace events, there are some changes landed on master that add some new features to it. So specifically, there is a node inspector protocol. So it's available through the inspector protocol. That's brand new. I think that's available in 10 now as well, if I'm not mistaken. There are other changes happening, such as all the threads now get names, and there are also some bugs that I've been fixing and James has been fixing. James has also been working on intrinsic in V8, or that he's prototyping. And the idea is that intrinsic would make it easy for JavaScript programs to use trace events in a low overhead way. That's a work in progress. So stuff happening, but try out trace events, especially through inspector. And if there's bug reports, please do open.
Is there a UI over top of that?
Pardon?
Is there a UI over top of what's coming over the protocol?
DevTools, you can use DevTools, or you can use, so whatever UI you're using for debugging, that UI, depending on whether it supports trace events and it understands this protocol, they should be able to give you a UI. I don't know if DevTools has integrated it into the view in an easy way. I don't know the status of that one, but they might be working on it. And I think VS Code and others could probably do the same.
Okay. So you're saying that Chrome DevTools does have some support for viewing what's coming across on the protocol, but it's not easy?
I don't know if it's perfectly wired together at this point, but so DevTools, it has a performance tab. Mm-hmm. And the performance tab is supposed to, like, it has been heavily focused on the browser at the moment.
Yep.
The performance tab gives you a profile and traces in one view. So I think what they're working on is making that support Node as well, but I don't know if it's wired up perfectly at this point.
Okay.
But that would be the place where this would be connected up.
Okay.
The alternative is, like, we can generate a file, and that file can be open in Chrome tracing or in the performance tab. So that works. But the idea is that debuggers can, like, automate all of this. You open your UI, debugger UI, it connects to the node process, it does tracing for you, it does the same way it does profiling.
Okay, great.
So these are newer features, and I think they're a bit buggy. So if people are, and I know the inspector protocol right now is buggy, that I'm working on a fix. That unless you started right at startup, some of the categories get permanently disabled. So it's very brand new, but please play with it and open bug reports.
Okay. Anything else here on that from anybody? Okay, number 157, that's the last thing on the agenda here, which is expectations about tier of support from diagnostic tools and VMs. I guess there's a deep dive supposed to happen on this, and Michael, you said you were going to schedule that at some point. Oh, did Michael drop off? I think he did.
Yeah, he had to go.
Okay. Anybody have any updates here? Okay. Okay. If there's nothing else from anybody, I think we're done perfectly on time. Anybody have anything else? Take that as no. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, bye.